Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The Nebraska Cornhuskers come off the heels of signing a phenomenal class in 2024, obviously highlighted at the quarterback position, Dylan Raiola, Danny Kalen. Taking a look at this Nebraska roster heading into 2024, there's probably still some work that needs to be done, and I think Matt Rhule and this Nebraska staff's focus now needs to be on what are the best ways that we can cultivate a very good environment for the development of these quarterbacks. And you take a look at the trajectory and the future of this program, a lot of it lies in how does Dylan Raiola, Danny Kalen develop as the quarterbacks for this Nebraska program. I want to talk about what they can do in the transfer portal to help kind of the development of these two young quarterbacks, the future of this program. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, again, just want to say thank you to you guys and a shout out to the Nebraska fans. One, you guys continue to show a ton of support to the boys. This is a program we love talking about, but more importantly, would love to hear your input for this conversation because there are a lot of different opinions you can have with regards to what this quarterback room should look like in the next couple of years. We're going to have a little conversation. Would love to hear from you guys, Dill. I'm going to kick this one off to you. Nebraska's quarterback room right now with Chuba Purdy leaving. Harburg, and then you got two true freshmen and Dylan Raiola, Danny Kalen. I'm going to ask you a simple question here. Do you think Nebraska needs to add a veteran quarterback in the transfer portal to kind of supplement what they already have in this quarterback room?
Yeah, I think they should certainly be trying to. And it might be hard just because coming into that spot it is when you bring that true freshman kind of generational talent, and it probably does scare off guys.
Scare away Kyle McCord.
Exactly. So it scares off those guys who are kind of like, well, I need to start in this last year if I'm going to go to the league or just for the sake of wanting to play in your last year. I think everyone kind of does. But I think you do want to avoid that position of starting someone by default just because you didn't really have someone you felt really comfortable with. And again, you've kind of mentioned it before. It's really rare for true freshmen to come in and play really good quarterback. Not to say it hasn't happened, and not to say if Dylan Raiola isn't ready, he shouldn't be the guy. But it is rare, and for that reason, I do think you should want a veteran who can, if nothing else, push Dylan Raiola and Danny Kalen to.
Yeah, if nothing else, and you bring in a veteran guy, and we'll talk about a few in just a second, you at least know that if Dylan Raiola beats that guy out in camp, like you know he's ready to play ball. Like if he just beats out Henrik Harburg in camp heading into the season, he's a quarterback one. And this is no shot at Henrik Harburg, but you didn't see enough from him in 2023 to then all of a sudden be extremely confident that Dylan Raiola has it, right? So you want to add a veteran quarterback that if Dylan beats him out, like you're comfortable and you feel good about what he's going to look like as a true freshman. I look back to the Dante Moore experiment for UCLA, right? They signed a 5-star quarterback in Dante Moore, not a ton of competition in the room. Dante Moore gets the starting job and he wasn't ready. Like the turnovers were a problem. The game was just going fast for him. You want to avoid that at all costs. You want to make sure when Dylan Raiola is stepping on the field that he is ready to play at the Power 5 level. Dill, the first guy
I think the big thing is you're kind of right. You did the hard part. You landed that generational guy. But you're right. If you throw him out there to the Wolves and it's like maybe he should be starting as a sophomore instead of a freshman, like that can be really disruptive. It's clearly been disruptive for UCLA, who now has lost Dante Moore to the portal. And you just don't want to kind of kill the relationship, if you will, because you
don't want to kill the relationship. You don't want to kill the confidence. Like it's a problem when quarterbacks play too early when they're not ready. And if you're Nebraska, you want to make sure that that's not the case. And if you don't bring in a transfer quarterback, you might be playing Dylan Raiola before he's not ready. Because I'll say this right now, he's probably quarterback one, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But you want to make sure that he's a ready quarterback one, not just a quarterback one, like you said, by default. First guy I want to talk about that I think would be kind of a dream fit, and you saw a lot of buzz around Casey Thompson, and that would have made a lot of sense, right? He's a seventh-year guy. He's played for Nebraska already. You know that there's a baseline there. And if Dylan Raiola beats Casey Thompson out, he's probably ready to play at the Power 5 level. Another guy that I think would make a lot of sense is Jerry Bohannon. And this makes a lot of sense for a couple different reasons. One, former Baylor quarterback. This is a guy going into his 7th year of college football. So he was around at Baylor when Matt Rhule was at Baylor. So you already have that existing relationship. He's been a successful quarterback at the Power 5 level. Baylor had some success with a guy like Jerry Bohannon. You bring him in. He's going into his 7th year of college football. He probably recognizes that The NFL might not be in his future, but he has the chance to compete for a quarterback one spot for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, one of the more storied programs in all of the country. I think this one would make a lot of sense for a multitude of different reasons. Plus, he kind of fits what Nebraska wants to do on offense, right? He's 6'3", 220 pounds, can extend plays with his legs. This would be kind of one of those guys you're looking at here.
Yeah, and aside from that, like kind of being the perfect fit in terms of being like that perfect bridge, I think it probably helps that Matt Rhule and him have a relationship, because at the end of the day, whoever comes in needs to be extremely trusting that this is going to be a fair battle, and that if they come in, they're going to have a shot to battle out with Dylan Raiola and Danny Kaling. Because again, when you bring that guy like a Dylan Raiola especially in, I think everybody kind of know, like, the writing's on the wall that he's the guy. This isn't totally up for grabs, or at least that's the perception. So having a relationship, I certainly think helps, because again, if Matt Rhule kind of tells him, like, look, I'll give you a battle, I'll let you go compete for this job, he might be more inclined to trust him than some random quarterback.
And also, there's also an element of that understanding that, hey, we're bringing you in here. We might not be bringing you in to be the starting quarterback, but you can be that guy that's played 7 years of college football to help these young quarterbacks develop. And so Matt Rhule kind of having that relationship, knowing that might be a possibility for a guy like Jared Bohannon, I think makes a lot of sense. Another guy that I would be looking at that, and I continue, Nebraska fans that have been rocking with the fellas for the last couple of weeks know how I feel about Matthew Sluka. Now, he's a quarterback from the FCS level, so he's making that jump all the way up to the Big Ten level. That's a big jump. Matthew Sluka was given the nickname the Tim Tebow of the FCS. 6'3", 220 pounds. He has passed for over 5,800 yards. He's run for over 3,500 yards. He's a guy that will give you a high floor in terms of your quarterback play, because he can do it with his legs. He can do it with his arm. He's shown he can do it at the college football level. This would be another guy that you bring in and you're selling, hey, you're Power 5 quarterback now for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And if Dylan Raiola, again, beats Matthew Sluka out, again, you're feeling pretty good about where Dylan Raiola might be as a starting quarterback as a true freshman.
And one thing with a guy like that, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, and frankly, the Nebraska thoughts, is do you almost want to bring in a guy who is a very much a proven passer rather than a Heinrich Haarberg, who kind of made his bones running for them? Because at the end of the day, to me, I think you want to show that this offense at least can do something in the air. Because when you're thinking about what you need to do for Dylan Raiola, it's not only thinking about this year, but the next couple of years. You need to find some way to attract some offensive talent in addition. So I think this year is going to be a big year in finding out somebody who can, like, have a guy catch for more than 300 yards.
I agree with that. And as Michigan fans, we kind of fell into this trap a little bit where we didn't really have the most explosive passing attack for the last couple of years. And now it's kind of fixed with JJ McCarthy. But for a while, it was, bully ball. We're running the football. We don't really have a dynamic passing attack. And then all of a sudden you look at the recruiting trail and it's like, we're not bringing in any talented wide receivers because these wide receivers at the high school ranks are looking at this program and saying, this is not a spot for me to develop. So I get that. I think that, and we've talked about this, I've had a lot of conversations with the Nebraska fans in the comments. I think that Nebraska offense last year was a product of poor quarterback play, as opposed to what they want to do on offense. Like, I don't think they want to be as...
That's 100% why I say it probably is important that you have somebody who isn't going to be running a gimmick offense at all. It's got to be kind of that pro style, be able to rip it from the pocket. You still want to run the ball. You're in Nebraska. I think you always want 100%. To do that, but you want to show some ability to push the ball down the field and give it a wide receiver a chance to go pro out of that program. Because again, you look at a guy like Billy Kemp, had a fairly productive career. It's just they didn't have a quarterback.
Billy Kemp would have been so much better in that offense if they had I really do think that, and it's just the passing attack never really got off the ground there. But if it had to, or if it had, I should say, I think Billy Kemp would have been a guy. Now, the next thing I'm looking at here, and I think this is massively important. When you look at a young quarterback's best friend, and if Dylan Raiola is going to be the starter, whether it's in 2024, whether it's in 2025, the best thing you can do for a quarterback, especially a young quarterback, is get a run game going. And I think first you talk about the offensive line. I like where Nebraska is on the offensive line. You have a couple of really veteran guys returning. More importantly, that group got better. And that's again, I've said this multiple times here. one of the things you're most excited about with the Matt Rhule era, and I get there's a lot of disappointing things about that 2023 season. The most exciting thing is that offensive line got better. Like from week 1 to week 12, that offensive line took strides. And if they can take strides in the offseason, this is an offensive line that's going to be good for Nebraska. They have the personnel. So I'm not necessarily looking at bringing in a ton of offensive linemen. I like where they are. I'm thinking about maybe adding some depth in that running back room. And a guy that's getting a lot of buzz from Nebraska media, taking an official visit out of the transfer portal in January, Dante Dowdle. This is a guy that as a senior in high school put up some ludicrous numbers in the state of Mississippi. You see his national ranking, was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. Still, that Oregon running back room is just super loaded. And as a true freshman, struggled to get on the field. 6'2", 215 pounds. I think he fits exactly how Nebraska wants to run the football. And again, Emmett Johnson, I love Emmett Johnson. I think he's awesome. But you want to bring in a running back that's going to kind of balance him out. And I think Dante Dowdle, with that physical nature in which he runs, would be a perfect fit for this Nebraska offense in 2024.
And definitely not a guy leaving Oregon for the wrong reasons. I think you said it. Like, they had a bunch of really, really good running backs, so probably in the future have a bunch of really good ones. And I think a guy, frankly, who probably has the talent, knows he's got it to be that more of that feature guy, that guy who can play a little more versatile than maybe what some of the Nebraska running backs on the current roster are. So I think he does give you that, again, kind of that guy you can rely on, because they didn't really have that all down guy who I really felt.
Yeah, and I think Gabe Ervin, unfortunately, could have been that guy, and he just, obviously with the injury, and that's probably why you're looking at bringing one in, right? Anthony Grant now out. You got Emmett Johnson. Hopefully, a guy like Gabe Ervin gets back to 100%. You have Ramir Johnson, who wants to come back for another year.
But even Gabe Ervin, I think, again, he's really good in between the tackles. I don't think he's the best in space guy. I think having a guy who, again, you can kind of line up and you can either run it inside, you can throw it to him. He's just, I think, has a higher level skill set than pretty much any back on that roster. I think that'll help, because I felt like there were times where you kind of knew almost by who was in what type of plays were going to be called, because Gabe Ervin was not going to be catching balls out of the backfield that much. He wasn't going to be taking stuff to the edge. It was more get him the ball inside and let him go to work. And then maybe some of the other backs they were going to bring in to do some of those other things. But to have kind of that one guy who does it all, I do think it's big in terms of.
And I would agree with the fact that and this is not a knock on a Gabe Ervin or Emmett Johnson. This is Dante Dowdle will be the most talented back in this backfield. And that's just, I mean, you look at it, he's a guy that runs a sub 1100 meter dash at 6'2", 215 pounds. The senior year film from him coming out of high school was absolutely ludicrous. Had offers from every single SEC school in the country. If you have the opportunity to bring a game-changing running back into your team, even if you feel good about some of the running backs in your room, Matt Rhule even said it. We're not going to use the transfer portal ultra aggressively to flip our roster, but when we have the opportunity to bring in a guy that's a game changer, we're going to do it. And I think Dante Dowdle certainly could be that guy. Now, the last position group that I think needs to be talked about, and this is, again, not me saying I'm not confident in that wide receiver room. It's just young. And you look at fostering a really positive situation for Dylan Raiola or whoever's going to be starting at the quarterback position in 2024, that situation is probably not throwing to a bunch of receivers that are going into their second year of college football and Alex Bullock. That's not a knock on those guys. I think they can be really good football players. You want to add veteran receivers who have showed that they can do it at the Power 5 level. Dill, the first guy I'm going to talk about here, Mario Williams from the state of Florida, was at Oklahoma. Then he goes to USC. Now he's in the transfer portal as a graduate transfer. Mario Williams was so good his freshman and sophomore year, and then kind of just got lost in a loaded wide receiver room out at USC as a junior. You talk about bringing in a quarterback's best friend, a guy that creates separation early, can work after the catch, somebody that can take a little pressure off a quarterback. Mario Williams is that guy. Would love to see him in a Nebraska uniform in 2024.
Yeah, and I think this situation, frankly, is perfect for a guy
like
him, where you can kind of come in and be the one.
Yep.
Not in a room that's untalented. It's just you might be the one because, again, what you kind of mentioned, A, really, really young, and B, I don't think those wide receivers, frankly, got the same chance to develop in that scheme, just given what they were forced to do by the lack of quarterback talent. So Like, I think Lloyd looks like he's going to be a really, really good player. I loved what you saw about him. Malachi Coleman obviously has talent for days, and Doss kind of similar to Coleman, like really, really talented. You just want to see more. But this is a unit that I don't think you're coming into like empty cupboards, but you're coming in, and if you're an older veteran who can kind of prove yourself, you're gonna have lots.
Why did Julian Fleming want to come to Nebraska? I mean, obviously, one, maybe because of Cotton McCord, but two, like he probably saw that room and said, "Yeah, I'm that wide receiver one." Immediately when I walk into that room, I think Mario.
But you're not
Williams,
I think it's important to note you're not like the only guy, because when you're the only guy, that's not helpful either. You don't want to come into some room that you look like, oh, everybody stinks in this wide receiver room, because if everybody stinks, then you can get a lot of attention. I think like Nebraska has guys you need to pay attention to right now. Like these freshmen, they're really, really talented. They do a lot of good things. I just think if you're like an old veteran or older veteran wide receiver, you can
you
kind
also
of
have
step in and get a lot
like
out of it.
also the 2024 class is low. Like there are some guys in that wide receiver room that are coming in that are awesome. And it's like if you're Nebraska looking at how to cultivate a healthy depth chart, you're just saying, yeah, we just need a few bridge wide receivers. And we don't need guys that are going to be here for 3 more years because we know we have some good wide receivers coming in. We recruited them from the high school ranks. You want a wide receiver that can kind of bridge this 2024 season where you are a little bit more inexperienced. I think Mario Williams would be that guy. Another guy, Chris Hudson. Again, played a ton of football at Oregon. Very similar conversation, has had years where he was featured in that offense. You look at last year, kind of just got lost in the mix of those wide receivers out at Oregon. Former St. John Bosco guy. Does similar things to Mario Williams and Billy Kemp in terms of we're going to create separation early. We're going to work after the catch. All things that are a quarterback's best friend. Chris Hudson, Mario Williams, very similar players, 2 guys that I think would be really good fits in this Nebraska offense. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't necessarily need to be Mario Williams or Chris Hudson, but these are the kind of players that I think would be good fits. Guys that are experienced, have had a lot of Power 5 experience, and guys that are going to be able to be that quarterback best friend role. Chris Hudson, Mario Williams, 2 guys that I think kind of check those boxes a little bit.
Yeah, and similar to what what you kind of mentioned, Billy Kemp should have been if they had quarterback play that was able to use him. Because I agree, you just want a guy who can catch a lot of football, like footballs. That's what I would be looking for. Someone who's done a lot in the past and maybe for whatever reason has gotten phased out or whatever reason they think they need to leave a place like Oklahoma or USC or Oregon. Like these guys aren't leaving because they're scrubs. It's coaching staff changes, quarterback leaving, those types
also
of things.
just depth chart stuff. Yeah. Like, yeah, I mean, that's just a reality, especially with the transfer portals. You commit to a school, you think you're going to have your opportunity, and then they go grab 3 guys in the transfer portal at the wide receiver position like Oregon did. And all of a sudden your opportunities are not what you thought they were when you committed back in 2020 to the Oregon Ducks. Now, though we were going to do like a whole Nebraska transfer portal wish list, but when we got into this and kind of were researching and looking at this depth chart, we said they don't really need to go get a ton of guys. Like this roster is not in that bad of a spot. There are just particular positions that you could see Nebraska adding. And we look at the defense. I don't know if there's a single position group where I'm looking at like Nebraska needs to go at. So these are kind of what I'm looking at. And Matt Rhule and this coaching staff's goal for the next 3 months, 4 months is how can we get the best environment for young quarterbacks to develop? And I think 1, bringing in an experienced quarterback for competition, for some mentorship. 2, getting a run game going, starting with a dynamic running back and getting a little bit more experience at the wide receiver position. Would love to hear what the Nebraska fans think. These are kind of some of our players we would like to see Nebraska go after. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.